Welcome, fellow recovering traditionalists, to episode 156 Virtual Mass Summit Preview Things to Think About When Doing Number Routines. Welcome to Build Math Minds, the podcast, where fidelity to your students is greater than fidelity to your textbook. I'm your host, Christina Tonnevold, the recovering traditionalist and BuildMathMinds.com founder, where my mission is to change the way we teach elementary math to our kiddos. So, are you ready to start building math minds and not just creating calculators? Let's get started. Before we get into the episode, this week's positivity comes from Facebook comments. I know, can you believe there are positive comments out there on Facebook? All joking aside, I don't really enjoy being on social media or replying to comments, so it always kind of makes my day when I'm in there going through comments and I see these nice ones. I was going through comments on some posts and came across these two back-to-back comments about the summit from Roxanne and Davida. Roxanne said, "This virtual summit would be well worth your weekend. Your administration may even sub these 2 days for your regular scheduled monthly PD days. Worth watching and worth asking." Now, I know not everybody has PD days that you're scheduled for, but hey, if you do, check and see. And then Davida said, "My favorite PD of the whole year. Can't wait." Well, thank you both for sharing those comments. It really did warm my heart as I was going through comments, which is not my favorite part of my day. All right. So we are officially in Virtual Math Summit month. Can you believe it? The summit is at the end of this month, so we have just a few more previews to give you. If you haven't registered yet, I'm going to remind you to get on over to virtualmathsummit.com/register. There are 3 levels of registration. Free registration gives you 10 days to watch this year's sessions. We also have a VIP level, which gives you access to only this year's sessions, but through the end of March. So you have an entire month to watch them. Or if you'd like access to the past 7 years of summits along with this year's, you can become a member of the Build Math Minds PD site. Information about all 3 options is available at virtualmathsummit.com/register. And as always, I will post links on our show notes page, which is buildmathminds.com/156. All the show notes pages, if you haven't caught on by now, are the number, it's the number of the episode. So this week's episode, we are on number 156 of this podcast, which is pretty darn cool. All right. So this week's episode is also our 4th preview of some of the sessions from the upcoming 2024 Virtual Math Summit. So if you haven't seen the other ones, go back, watch, listen, wherever you're watching or listening to this. In this episode, I'm sharing sessions that give us ideas for math routines. In each of these sessions, they share tips on how to make your routines the most productive and impactful, along with giving you routines you can do with your students the very next day. Up first is a clip from Michaela Epstein's session, Powerful Math Routines for All Learners. Now, a word of caution, she is from Australia, so you might hear her say maths instead of math. So don't let that throw you off. In this clip, she is sharing tips on how to make your routines impactful. She shares just 3 of her tips here, and then she talks about them in regards to a specific routine. So to get all the tips, you've got to come to the Virtual Math Summit.
We're going to take a look now at what are the actual underpinning elements of impactful math routines. So what makes the difference between those routines that are merely just a routine and don't offer students that much, and those that actually help students to become stronger, more confident, and critical mathematical thinkers. So as I share these elements, you might start thinking about routines that you're already doing in your classroom and how these elements fit with them. So let's go. The first aspect, and probably the most obvious, is that maths routines are short and repeatable, okay? They don't take up the whole amount of class time. They could even be as short as 5 minutes, but they have that repeatable structure that you can keep coming back to and that over time becomes very familiar for students. And really, as part of this, these routines are quick for you to plan. You consider which examples you're going to use, but you know how the routine works and you know what the setup of it looks like. With the sorts of routines that I'm sharing with you today, I always find it easiest to look at the topic that I'm currently teaching and then the common resources that I'd be using, whether it's textbook or a worksheet, and actually drawing examples from them to populate the routine. Now, the third element of these routines is that they allow all students to access the maths. So they've got a low enough floor that means that every student in the classroom can actually think about the mathematics of what's going on. We're not trying to trick students here or push them to some new challenge. We actually want them all to get involved so that they can all have an opportunity to share their thinking and their reasoning. So let's take a look at the next routine now and some examples for what this could look like.
Nicole and Jessica make up NJ Consulting, and in their session, Getting Explicit with Number Talks, one of the tips they give is about the importance of using the same representation for student strategies when they are sharing during a number talk. To get the full effect of this, it helps to see their visual, which will be in the video episode, which is over at youtube.com/buildmathminds. And I'll also post a picture at the show notes page. Again, buildmathminds.com/156.
Okay, so we talked earlier about keeping a consistent representation through your number talk. So we have an example here as to why and how that can be so powerful. So if you look at the left there, and you try and decipher the student strategies, but then you look at the right, we want you to have a think about which is clearer. If you were a student sitting in a classroom, which one would you be able to relate to better? Which one would help your understandings? So obviously we can see that when we represent in a clear, consistent way, like on the right, using the number lines, you can actually see how the strategies connect. So we can see that the first student there has counted on by ones, but the next student has added on a 10. We can actually see that Eric, Angel, and Jasmine all had the same strategy. They were just represented in different ways on the left there. So we're actually able to be much more intentional with our number talks when we represent them in the same way. And students can see, oh, look, a few students actually added 10. Why would they do that? Why would they add a 10? And then you can start having a conversation about place value. Whereas on the left side, you can't really see that. It's not clear.
No, definitely not. So, from our point of view, using the same representation is really key. It's really instrumental in making sure, your connections or that talk part of the lesson is able to sort of really focus on those connections. So, we don't do a number talk where we use different representations in the same number talk. It's always the same.
And revoicing is really important here. I think Jess touched on it earlier. Revoicing is about helping the rest of the students in a class understand what a particular student is saying. So if, say Franklin is giving me a strategy, I, as a teacher, am revoicing that so that the other students can understand, and I'm representing it in a clear way so that it's really visual, and we're helping students make those connections.
Our last tip on number routines comes from Rosalba Serrano and her session, Not Your Typical Math Routines. Her tip is to be flexible on when you do which types of routines. Don't be so scheduled.
Please stop making everything a scope and sequence, okay? Not everything has to be sequenced to like the T, okay? And I'm including myself in this because I actually made this mistake early on in my career. It's just like, I don't know, habitual, I guess. I don't know what it is, but we always want to pace everything, right? We always want something so scheduled out, but that is not how these routines should go. I see a ton of schools do this where they dictate when a certain routine is done on what day. So for example, there's a school district that dictates that their teachers do number talks every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, right? Another school district, actually one that's nearby, actually has problem solving Friday. So you do a problem solving routine on Friday. I'm sorry, but why? Why? Who says that that needs to be the rule? That is so cuckoo crazy. Math is flexible, right? And it's based on what students need. So please do not structure this so rigidly. And again, I'm being vulnerable and saying I made this error in the beginning of my career where I was so rigid with when I did routines with my students. You have to be a little bit more fluid and flexible when it comes to this. Let me give you a couple strategies on how to mix these up. When you're thinking about what routine you should do, I want you to think about what you're trying to accomplish. So first of all, do you want to do a routine right now? Let's say tomorrow. Let's say tomorrow you're going to do a routine. Do you want to do it to build in as a build in, right? Like, do you want to do it because it's going to lead into a support or support like an upcoming lesson? Okay. Maybe you want to do the routine as a review, like a tier 1 support, like a spiral review, right? Or maybe you want to do a routine and it's tied to nothing at all. You just want to do the routine. Okay. Like you think it'll be fun to do the ABCs of fractions today. Okay. Then do that. Sometimes it doesn't have to be tied to anything. Just see what your students need. If some kids, let's say, are struggling with magnitude for a hot sec, then do a routine on that. Don't just ignore the fact that they need that because you're on Number Talk Monday. Like, that doesn't make sense. That's ridiculous. Do not be so rigid.
If you'd like to learn more about using number routines in your classroom, make sure you are signed up for the summit, virtualmathsummit.com/register. Until next week, my fellow recovering traditionalists, keep building math minds.